Today's video covers 3 disturbing stories that took place on New Year's Eve. From a beheading, a stabbing, to a twisted love triangle, these 3 cases cover a spectrum of sinister individuals, and of course, the tragic fate of their victims. Hi, I'm Oricat and welcome to our channel. I deliver cases to you in the dramatisation format, so if that's something you enjoy, you'll be happy to know we upload twice a week. As always, my aim is to give a voice to the victims and remember them as they were. So with that, let us begin. On the 31st of December 2014, the sun was setting on Altamar, Florida. Altamar is nestled on the northern tip of Tampa Bay. It has a unique blend of Florida old charm and modern convenience. Altamar is one of the greenest areas in Florida, as well as having close access to some of Florida's most famous beaches. Now, whilst most people were planning to celebrate the arrival of a new year in a modest home on Plymouth Street, 48-year-old Maria Suarez Casagni went about her normal routine, unaware that these would be her final hours. Her son, 23-year-old Christian Gomez, had been staying with her over Christmas, and tensions had started to run high between the mother and son, especially over the last couple of days. In preparation for the new year, Maria wanted to set about cleaning up her house and getting everything sorted. She simply asked her son, Gomez, to move some boxes into the attic for her. Now, this request was pretty mundane, but for Christian, it turned into an obsession. It snowballed into something bigger, a perceived slight that pushed him over the edge, so to speak. It was like he had just completely blown his fuse. A bit of information before this, which is handy to know, is that Maria tirelessly spent years trying to help her son. She knew he had recurring mental health issues and repeatedly reached out to state services, but they would never get any help and her son continued on a downward spiral. But it was during the evening hours the consequences of the state's negligence would finally be seen. You see, for 2 days Gomez had been plotting. He had been redirecting his anger into something that would be impactful and permanent. A way to release this rage that just wasn't leaving him. His chosen weapon for that night was an axe, and coming up behind his unsuspecting mother, he let out all the fury that had been building within. All down the street, New Year's Eve celebrations were getting underway, but at 7:22 p.m, the police got a phone call. This was from a man called Mario Gomez, who was Christian's brother. He was absolutely inconsolable, reporting to have found his mother's body outside with the trash cans. So when Sheriff Bob Gualtieri arrived, he recalled it being the most terrifying thing he had ever seen during his decades of law enforcement experience. Because, like Mario had said, they had found Maria's body next to the trash cans, but to build on top of all this mounting horror was finding her severed head actually in those cans. Considering Christian Gomez was the last known person to be seen with his mother, the police automatically set about tracking him down. He hadn't got very far, having fled the scene not much before his brother arrived. He was caught fleeing on a bicycle before the police eventually intercepted him. But considering the gravity of the crime, when the police brought him in for questioning, they thought they were going to be faced with a long night of him evading questions and telling lies. But Gomez came out and just immediately confessed to everything and said that he had been planning it for the last 2 days. He simply didn't want to move the boxes into the attic, so instead he thought the logical solution was to get rid of his mother. The story obviously made headlines in Florida at the time because a woman had just been senselessly murdered by her own son for absolutely no reason at all. Christian Gomez was charged with first-degree murder. And so for Maria Suarez Casagni, there would be no new year. For her son Christian, the future only holds prison walls. And for the community of Altamar, New Year's Eve was likely never going to be the same again. This next story takes place in Daytona Beach, Florida, which is situated along Florida's Atlantic coast. Daytona Beach stands as a unique blend of motorsports, heritage, and coastal charm. It's an area very big on racing cars, and also very popular for spring vacation. So as the final hours of 2016 ticked away at Daytona, the streets were alive with the electric energy of New Year's Eve celebrations. And it was outside the Full Moon Saloon on Main Street that hundreds of people had gathered, their spirits high with anticipation for 2017. But none of them could have predicted how the night would have unfolded. Amongst the crowd was 32-year-old Robert Mazaros. He had made his way down from Wildwood, Florida, to join in with the celebrations. It took him and his fiancée around an hour and 40 minutes to get there. So as the clocks approached approximately 11:45 p.m, the festive atmosphere started to take a dark turn. In the packed space outside the popular bar, something had sparked Mazaros' fury. Without warning, Mazaros pulled out a pocket knife. And because in the crowd the space was so cramped, there was absolutely nowhere for someone to run. His motivations were considered murky at best, but regardless, Mazaros flew into a rage. And he stabbed 3 people within that chaos, including his own fiancée. The 3 victims were taken to the hospital, and the night air was suddenly filled with the sirens of ambulances, rather than the toasts of champagne. Law enforcement responded swiftly to the scene, and Mazaros was immediately arrested. He was charged with 3 counts of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. The justice system would soon set a bond for Mazaros at $30,000, and because the bond wasn't paid, Mazaros would start his new year behind bars, whilst the Full Moon Saloon incident would become a tragic part of Daytona's history. Fortunately, all victims of Mazaros survived with non-life-threatening wounds. In the years after the attack, the Full Moon Saloon still continues to host New Year's Eve celebrations. But for many locals, that night carries the shadow of that violent end to 2016. Towards the tail end of the night, on the 31st of December 2016, Oklahoma residents were preparing to welcome 2017. Yet they never would have been able to anticipate the tragedy that would leave one young man behind bars and the other one dead. Over its history, Oklahoma City has transformed from a frontier outpost into a vibrant metropolis that perfectly balances its cowboy heritage with its contemporary culture. The city hosts 3 major art festivals and boasts over 50 independent galleries. At around 10:05 p.m, the police got a call that a vehicle looked abandoned. The driver inside wasn't moving, and the car was completely stationary. So the police headed over to find that the vehicle was parked in the lot of a convenience store. And when they looked inside, they came across a seriously wounded 20-year-old. They eventually managed to identify him as Matthew Webster. He had been shot and he was barely coherent. Matthew was rushed to the local hospital, but unfortunately he wouldn't survive his injuries. After that, the investigation moved swiftly, and the police quickly arrested an individual by the name of Harith Hamid. He was only 18 years old at the time, arrested during the early morning hours. From what the police could gather from a few witness statements, they managed to figure out that the 2 boys had had an altercation at Hamid's home. Originally, Matthew had been planning to buy some marijuana from Hamid, but an argument broke out. This led to Hamid pointing his gun at Matthew, and the 2 took their fight outside. It was at this point Hamid intended to rob Matthew of all his belongings. Then once Hamid got what he wanted, he coldly executed Matthew with multiple shots. a fair few of the rounds even embedding into the vehicle Matthew had arrived in. Hamid then drove Matthew's vehicle up to the convenience store and left him there. Hamid was quickly charged with first-degree murder and robbery with a dangerous weapon. These charges incidentally suggested to the public that this hadn't been a random attack, but that it was a planned criminal endeavour gone wrong. As investigators pieced together more facts about that fateful night, they eventually sought additional information from a 19-year-old girl called Victoria Smith. They believed she might hold crucial information about the circumstances which led up to Matthew's death. I mean, she was Matthew's girlfriend after all. And as Smith was added into the picture, the police uncovered a complex web of relationships and the circumstances which had led to this deadly encounter. Checking Hamid's phone after the crime, the police found that he had had some damning conversations with Victoria Smith. You see, though Smith was romantically involved with Matthew during the time of the incident, she had only just recently broke up with Hamid. And this obviously added fuel to the fire when the two boys met up, resulting in Hamid harbouring resentment for Matthew. For whatever reason, despite their current relationship, Matthew had fallen out of favour with Smith. And so this was when the communication between Hamid and Smith took a more sinister tone. In court, the affidavit stated that within Hamid and Smith's text messages, they revealed intent to shoot Matthew and then abandon his body. In fact, straight after Hamid had actually shot Matthew, he physically texted Smith and told her as much. And her callous reply was saying how she hoped Hamid had landed all his shots. She was then very vocal about helping Hamid dispose of Matthew's body. This included offering him her own licence plate so he could use it to disguise his vehicle. Hamid refused to do this, so instead Smith told him to drive around and wait until he found a paper tag he could use. A paper tag on a car refers to a temporary licence plate. It's usually made of thin cardboard and it allows the car to be driven legally until obviously a permanent licence plate arrives. Hamid was held in Oklahoma County Jail until he was handed his first-degree murder charges. And as far as the police are concerned, even though they have a warrant out to bring in Victoria Smith for questioning, she has never been found. Matthew's family were understandably devastated over what had happened. It was an irreplaceable loss and Hamid's sentencing wasn't going to bring Matthew back. So as the case made its way through the justice system, the community had to grapple with the loss of an innocent young life. But Matthew was more than just another statistic, because his fate was a sobering reminder of violence that can erupt even during times of jubilation. It always pays to stay aware and stay safe wherever you are celebrating and whoever you are celebrating it with. Thank you for watching. Comment down below your worst New Year's Eve experience.